This episode of Collin Votes is brought to you by Jesse Ringness for HD66. For more information on Jesse and his campaign, go to Facebook and follow the page Ringness for TX HD66. Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Collin Votes. I'm Shanna, one of your hosts, and with me always is Jeff Williams, our candidate for Collin County Commissioner, Precinct 4.
You got it down now.
Aha! And today we're getting to spend some time with Jesse Ringness. He's here to talk to us about the race for HD66. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
How's it going, my friend? Good to have you here.
It's going very well. Very well today.
Good. You found the place okay?
I did, yes.
It's a nice day today. We don't have snow or anything to contend with, so
True.
got that on our side. Yep. All right. So I see your lovely tip sheet here. I like this. This is very handy. It puts
Thank
everything
you.
all in one place here.
Thank you.
You said he just got vaccinated before you came over here, didn't you?
Yes, last night.
Oh, really?
Yep. So I had an appointment for 6 o'clock vaccination yesterday. It went well.
At Walgreens?
Yes.
Yeah, I saw they gave you a Walgreens Band-Aid.
Yes.
That's cool.
Ah.
Yep.
You feeling okay?
Yeah, I feel fine.
Good. Which one did you get?
The Pfizer.
Okay.
Yep.
Right on. Good choice.
Lucky you, man. I got crushed.
Really?
Because I got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine first, which means I had to get the double dose of Moderna when I went back. And
Right.
I was down for like 2 days.
Well, it did make me sleep in. I overslept this morning. I had an 8 a.m. and a noon, and I missed both.
Hardly a vice, though, my friend, because
Yeah.
you're always up to something. So
Yeah.
Yeah. I did Moderna. I had 2 doses, and then I got the booster, and the booster, oof,
Yeah.
that knocked me for a loop even then. So, no, but it's good to do.
Yeah.
we've been looking forward to having you on, me in particular, just because we've seen each other at a lot of events, kind of like with Kevin Morris, and we just had, never really had a chance to talk. So,
Yes.
so we'll finally get an opportunity,
Yep.
Yeah.
And
That's great.
one of the things I told Jesse just in talking to him was that he has a great personal story, and I told him, I said, you want to definitely make that a part of your campaign,
Sure.
Right.
because you don't want, the best thing you can have in politics is a story that that people will assume that your empathy isn't for
Right.
for purchase. You
Right.
know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It can't be bought.
Right.
So
I think it helps people kind of see themselves in a
Exactly.
candidate a lot of times. Like, where are the commonalities, and not just what do I like about the person, but like if I feel like they're a little bit like me, then maybe they'll care more about my issues or whatever.
Exactly.
So.
It's a fine line to walk as well, though. You don't want to always be the negative person. Like, let me tell you about all my problems.
Right.
But at the same time, going through struggles is what people relate to the most.
Right.
Sure.
Everyone has their own struggles. We all have family with issues. And so talking about it is one of the best ways to break that taboo stereotype
Yeah.
and work through it.
That's very true.
it seems like more and more as I go through this, that the issues are really more of like a veneer. And then once you get through that, it's like once you break through the permafrost, it's like people just want to connect with you.
Right.
That's the bottom line.
Right. They just want to talk. They just want to find out who you are, what you stand for.
So let's talk a little bit about that story then.
Yeah.
So you're a Frisco native.
Yes, so I was
Okay.
born and raised in Texas. I am a Texan at heart. I've lived in Frisco since 1994.
Okay.
Before that, I was at the Colony. And then I graduated high school, went through all of FISD schools, moved out to Florida for a couple years, did California for a year, kind of did some traveling, but came back home to be a caretaker. So I've been a caretaker since the late 90s. My mom was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So that's part of the story that I tell a lot, just because everyone has a grandparent that has cancer or Alzheimer's disease, or someone knows someone. Everyone has people that pass from different illnesses. So I think that's one of the main reasons that got me interested in politics is lowering those prices. So that's one of the main things that I talk about is
Yeah, you gotta-
healthcare.
Sure.
That's my story right there.
You got to stake in your own campaign. Yeah.
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 Yeah, absolutely. And even if they don't have someone that have like a experienced a loss or have someone that they're worried about their healthcare, but they will at some point.
Right.
Like,
Right.
even if you're a younger person, if you have parents,
Right.
this is going to be
Well, I was just at the bank, and the lady that was helping me, was flabbergasted because she was like, my younger sister just got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. It's so weird that we're having this conversation. She's 21 years old. She's had 2 strokes already. And for 21 years old, I mean, that's
Yeah.
a pretty frightening thing to have 2 strokes, to have lesions on your brain. So while it's not necessarily the same medical issues that I was dealing with in the 90s, there's still young people that are being diagnosed daily.
Sure.
So
Absolutely. One of the most striking things about MS is it's not necessarily a very visible disability
exactly.
to a lot of people. And it also doesn't really follow a very linear path. You can look fine one day and have diminished capacities the next, and that's very, very difficult for some people to comprehend.
Right.
More so also, not to try to, but I also see a lot of difficulty just even within the medical community or within like employers or government agencies. Like it's not, I don't get to a level and then stay there. I mean,
Right.
at some point, but
It's very up and down. It's
Yeah.
very fluctuating. And I've even dealt with that on my end, being a caretaker and being so one-on-one with someone with the disease. As they get older and as they progress, you do see that mental deterioration. You do see things that, are hard to kind of deal with.
and that people don't think about.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how you were given that role?
Well,
Like in terms of like the family dynamic and.
yeah, my mom and my dad got divorced early 90s. Well, maybe not early 90s, mid 90s, late 90s. And so I lived with my mom growing up. And for the longest time, she was very independent. She would take care of a lot of the business herself. She didn't really ask for much. It was more about the mobility aspect of it. So, I mean, I stepped up. There was times where it was difficult, of course. There were times that I regret things. There were times, there's a lot of
There's a learning
shoulda,
curve.
coulda, wouldas.
Sure. Yeah.
And being just now 31 years old, that was my 20s when everyone else was out partying and having fun and experiencing life. I was staying home because I knew I'm not going to get that chance later on.
Yeah.
So
True.
I did get to spend a lot of good quality time with her. So that's important. But a lot of people can't. A lot of people have to, work full-time jobs to make ends meet. And, there was a time when I was working 3 jobs at once, a full-time, 2 part-times, and still you can't pay for, these hundreds of thousands of dollars of medical bills without public funded grants or because it's just impossible. Yeah. So where are we? Where's the disconnect between the human and the person that's writing what each prescription, what each procedure, what these costs are? What's the disconnect?
That's very true.
We talk about it all the time, here in another podcast, and not necessarily in these words, but how we're still kind of latched on to this puritanical tradition of, roles, gender roles specifically, and also, like in terms of work ethic. Like you probably thought, hey, I got to have 3 jobs because I'm supposed to have 3 jobs. Not that it's actually going to add up to what I need.
Exactly.
But we've been programmed to think that if I'm not doing everything I can, then I'm a failure, right?
Exactly, 100%. It's a lot of worldly stress that you put on yourself, and there's a lot of people in my same position who parents are divorced, who they're taking care of an ill parent, and there's people that are a lot braver than I who were going to school full time and working full time and to care. You know what I mean?
Sure.
There's a lot of things where I did receive help, but at the same time, there was a lot of moments where I struggled without help, and there's so many people that are in that exact same boat that just need a hand, that needs an explanation. A lot of these things, I think we have a lot of issues is because we don't talk about stuff enough. There's not enough awareness, suicide prevention, mental health. If we talk about the taboo subjects more and break the barrier and talk about, my so-and-so, everyone knows someone.
Put a face to it. Yeah, that's very true. It's so funny that you say that. As soon as someone starts kind of like coming, like you said with the girl in the store, or the bank, I forget. There you go. As soon as you start opening up about those things, well, here comes their story too. And they may not feel okay to share those things with somebody else. But then when I hear like, oh, I'm not actually alone in this.
Right.
But you were saying about information, not only is visibility important, but talking openly about these things so that we can spread information about how to access services like respite caretakers or help from the United Way or, God knows, I mean, like 10,000 things, because just because you have a relative that ends in a certain spot doesn't mean that you automatically know how best to serve them or how to access anything.
Well, the other thing is a lot of these cities have a lot of public funding, but the people that need the help are not necessarily ones that are reaching out. There are people that need help with groceries and things like that, but you can't go and just ask for a large check to pay for your medical bills from these organizations or nonprofits. So there's a whole section, I think, of society that are not getting the help when the help is there. The funded, they don't know how to do it, you know. And these are also people like me that grew up in this kind of system of being a caretaker. So you might not know how to fill out these types of paperwork correctly, or, you know, so there's a lot of people that are just stopped by fear of the unknown. Like, I don't want to do it. And if we were able to get those resources to their front door, to them, make it in their face, so that way they can take that first step. You know, a lot of times we don't see those ads or the you know, this dialogue on the radio.
Yeah, that's true.
It's pretty similar to what I do. You just need somebody in the middle who speaks the language, you know. And hey, man, you might have that might be a new career that could blossom for you. Be a consultant. You can say, hey, I'm the one that can take you from A to B.
Sure.
Because like you said, even though it's out there, it still feels like you have to, you know, crawl through all that and may not necessarily know, you know, whether to turn left or right at any given moment.
And there's no one over your shoulder saying, oh yeah, you did that right. That's good. File for this paperwork. You know, it's kind of like running for office. I don't know what I'm doing. You know, I'm stepping into a world where there's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of deadlines. So having that ability to reach across and say, here's the first step.
Yeah.
Sure.
To get those resources out there.
Yeah, they did. I mean, it sounds like they did kind of that to both of us. They just kind of threw us in there. Yeah. Didn't really give us a playbook or anything.
They push you off the
like,
cliff, and then you sew the parachute on the way down.
Yes.
It's just,
oh yeah, you'll figure it out. Yeah,
Exactly.
You'll raise money. You'll get volunteers.
It's fine.
You're fine. You're done.
You'll be fine.
Yeah.
Well, you say somebody like you that doesn't necessarily have a background in politics, but you're not starting from cold, right? You've had some towing into.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's been some things here and there over the years. You know, with my YouTube channel, I've had several videos go viral. Over the past couple years, when my mom was going downhill, and going from a walker to a wheelchair to being fully disabled, I started going out and documenting protests. So, you know, if there's like an event, I'd get someone to be at home to watch mom, and I'd go out. So there are a lot of things that I've been publicly known for, kind of good or bad, left and right.
Right.
But oftentimes my media will get taken and then repurposed and resold and repackaged as their agenda. And I'm left as, you know,
Sure.
don't shoot the messenger, you know. Like, I was just there documenting the event. So, I mean, I've definitely stood up for a lot of different people, civil rights, you know, healthcare. There's a lot of things I would love to change for healthcare, handicap. You know, when you get into a handicap parking spot that's ADA appliant, but yet the van ramp doesn't even make it past the painted
sticks
lines.
Off the end.
And there's a car right next to you. What's the point of that spot? So, I mean, there's definitely a lot of things that, you know, I've stood up and spoke with the Frisco City Council a couple years ago with the water quality, more recently with getting a pet shelter for Frisco.
Oh.
You know, one of the biggest cities. We're well known for sports, but we don't even have a pet shelter for
weird.
the hundreds of, if not thousands of dogs that
I don't think
live.
I would have. Yeah.
So, but no, I don't come from like a political family.
No.
I'm not in with groups or organizations. It's definitely just me, myself, going out there and just kind of making a name for myself.
Well, I think sometimes even just being just a factual, non-influenced kind of observer of things is even performing a service. Like, you obviously thought people need to be seeing exactly what this is. There needs to be some visibility to this. Draw what conclusions you may.
Right. Like if I go document a protest, that protest is going to happen whether I show up or not.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it can be used on both sides. If someone does something to a police officer, they're going to use that video as evidence.
That's true.
And then on the other side, if an officer does something to a civilian, they can use that as evidence. So it's not like I'm there for a stance or a political. It's just there to document, you know.
Well, see, and I think that that's valuable. I think that sometimes people that are there for a stance or a, you know, like you know,
they influence it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways.
Well, so much of what we talk about in public in terms of education has been hijacked by the fact that, well, if somebody's putting this in front of us, they must have an agenda. It's not to enhance someone's understanding of a particular subject. You know, I mean, you notice, and I was talking about this with a friend earlier, you know, you go down that 16-page list of books that they want to ban.
Right.
Well, not they, that one guy. I don't even.
The name that shall not be named.
But I mean, I was looking at some of the issues that they addressed. It was mostly about race or gender roles or reproductive rights. But you don't ever see like a book like by Karl Marx. You know, don't even introduce the communism, even if it's just to dismiss it as an economic system. We still can't even talk about it. You know, just from a legitimate academic study. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So it's like you said, we just want to shine a light on it, or we just want to open up the book, literally.
Right.
And then people can come up with their own, decisions about whether they're going to be influenced or not. But instead, we'd rather just say, burn the book.
Right.
Nothing helpful or innovative is going to come from that kind of situation either. Like if you're presented with neutral information and then that's where new ideas and new movements come from. So,
right.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can understand if there's like one particular book out of 300 that you find an issue with and there's a legitimate issue with, okay, I can get maybe a book needs to be taken off a shelf. But to go through and to say that any book on race,
right,
any book, no. What they're trying to do is they are trying to 100% whitewash the history in Texas. And they're doing it on multiple levels. The book banning, whether it's how they stage their museums. There's a lot of different things that they're trying to kind of whitewash and ignore the facts.
Present a certain package and deny everything else.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. You said a second ago, like, if I was like somebody else who could go to school full time, but I'm looking at this pretty impressive list of volunteer experiences here. And I'm like, I don't know. It looked like you put a lot of time into a lot of different volunteer agencies.
Yeah, I was wondering where you find the time.
I was like, my goodness.
I suddenly feel lazy here.
Well, I mean, what that right there is a little bit of a total of everything.
Still, though.
But yeah, I've definitely gotten a lot more out this past year, trying to be more local. I've done missions before, just trying to get into the community locally. Minnie's food pantries, the Heritage Museum, things like that.
We love the Heritage Farmstead. My kids go there every summer. Yeah. Love it.
But that's just how, I have that kind of heart for service. And I think being a caretaker, you have to, otherwise.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm the kind of person that I would rather work for myself, or I'd rather be giving a service to the community than to be, paid by someone to do this, press that button every day, every hour,
Yeah. It also seems like you're one of the, you said, you have a heart for service. Absolutely. Or you wouldn't have this volunteer resume. But the thing that stands out with me with that is that's also a person who wants to experience a lot of meaning by the things that they do in their life, not just show up, push a button, get a salary.
Correct.
I'm literally engaging in things that I believe are meaningful, that help others, impact others.
Yes.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Kind of like when you go out in public and you wear a T-shirt and that represents something, It's like, it doesn't necessarily matter. It might not do anything, but if you can raise that awareness by having that logo or name out there, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Every little thing counts.
Yeah, that's true.
I was going to say, it seems like you were talking about how you felt like you didn't have the typical, experience in your 20s. Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
I was like, well, no, you had an experience, you had a life experience, and it probably informed your activism, at least, if not in its entirety, but to a certain extent. Was there anything else that kind of fueled that urge to help people?
Yeah, definitely. I kind of, when I talk about this, I talk about how tragedy and struggles really impact us and make us who we are. And so I think of my uncle who took his life in 2000. Oh. And so this was, a couple years after my parents got divorced. Then my mom was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. My uncle took his life. And so that's one thing that we don't talk about. My mom was a very private person, so she didn't talk about it. That wasn't something that we had conversations on. and that's affected me. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I would love to see stronger mental health and advocacy work, and even some public-private partnerships where you've got funding that's available for people that's not just state or, nonprofit or federal.
Sure. I like that. Suicidality is one of those things that many people, even like very well-meaning people, are rather misinformed about. And so kind of like, the spot the signs
Right.
stuff, not always that helpful.
Right. Well, and looking back on it, if, he was a gay man, I didn't know that at the time, but if he had just known where the world would progress to
Sure.
over the years,
Sure.
like how many things would be different? Would he be living life that he loved,
That's true.
So that's another thing that, suicide happens a lot in the LGBT,
Oh, yeah.
so that's something that I think more, campaigns and advertisement on to help raise awareness and resources.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, that's one of the things. So I don't think you know this. I'm a therapist.
Oh, okay.
And so, yay. I'll be the mental health rep.
Let's book every Wednesday.
I know, right? Yay. Sometimes I'll talk with people, when they are in that low spot and having that, I'm like, I understand you have what feels like to you like all the best reasons in the world for like why this feels like the best option for you, but most likely there's something right around the corner that you have no clue about
Right.
that could change everything.
Right.
Like you're absolutely right. Like the world that my kids are growing up in does not resemble the world that I grew up in. And that's great. That's the way that should be. We should keep progressing, keep changing and whatnot, and releasing a lot of those old things that used to hold us back or frustrate. Like even Jeff said about the working 3 jobs, because that's the old school, old guard. I feel like I need to.
Yes.
We're only just now really having those conversations about, should someone really have to have 3 jobs to barely make it?
Right.
Yeah, is that really a good thing?
Yeah, I
Right.
don't think that's okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was watching an episode last night of Jimmy Kimmel, and they were doing like a on the street contestant thing.
Oh, yeah.
And they pulled in a couple people. There were 3 people, and they were trying to guess which person. And the person in the middle talked about how she was self-medicating with marijuana because she was working 2 jobs, and like was like serious and honestly talking about it. And then at the end of it, they're like, "All right, here you go, contestants. Here's a frisbee. Go play." And it's like she literally just told you how like she's struggling in America, and yet we ignore it because it's
Sure.
not a packaged TV product.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We just hand them the frisbee and move on. So
I remember there was a panel or something, and President Bush a woman had just come up to speak, and she went off stage, and then he pointed at, that's American right there. She was talking about how she worked 3 jobs, and I'm like,
it shouldn't be.
yeah,
Yeah.
really, that passes for normal in America these days. Yeah, I think we're in a lot worse off shape than we think we are.
Yeah. You can acknowledge that fact and say that is very common with a lot of people, but then also maybe it shouldn't be.
Right.
like, don't just say,
Right.
that's great, good for you. Like pat on the back for being,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I've talked with people about how, about the whole thing with volunteers and campaigning. I think in the last couple of years, and I think this is a great thing actually, people have learned to reprice their time. Their time isn't more valuable. And with that, I think they realize, okay, I want to get paid more. I don't want to be working 3 jobs. I'm going to have a career that I love. I
Right.
want to do work that I enjoy. And that's the key. That's what it's all about.
And I think that's why we see so many people stepping away from
Right.
work is they're tired of putting in the time and the effort to be mistreated, to be undervalued, underpaid.
Yep.
And there's these people will work for 12 months straight and get a 12-cent raise for the next year.
Woo.
What incentive is that to say thank you? We appreciate your, because we forget in this so fast-paced society that we live in that we are giving up time of our life for a value.
Yeah.
And if we're putting that value too low, like you said, then we're
The value
cheating
of life
ourselves.
yeah.
But that mindset of that old structure of we have to just take that job because it's available, whatever they pay, instead of us selling ourselves and saying, this is what I'm worth,
Sure.
please hire me.
That's very true.
This is what makes me happy. Yeah.
This is what will keep me to survive,
Right.
It's not about just taking what we can get. And that's one thing I would love to do with Frisco, kind of like how we're campaigning and knocking on doors and meeting new people. I'd love to go to every business in Frisco, every restaurant, and walk in. What's your minimum wage? Are y'all hiring? Because everyone's got the hiring signs out. And I would love to just make an Excel sheet and be like, hey, 70% of your people are hiring under $10 an hour. I went to every single business. That's why. Right. You're not paying your people for the work.
Oh, that's very true. I heard something very interesting about those help wanted signs.
What?
I heard that during the quarantine pandemic, businesses got loans or grants, I forget which, from the government that were contingent upon, having a certain number of employees. And what happened is they reduced that down basically, and now they're working with just this like skeleton staff. And if they can't fill the positions, then they don't have to pay back the money. So a lot of them are saying they're hiring, but they're not actually hiring. It's kind of like when people kind of game the unemployment benefits.
That's what I was about to say. It's like the reverse.
It's like, oh yeah, I've been looking for a job, but they're not. And so they're trying to hold on to that money and overwork the staff that they've got all the time going, oh no, nobody wants to work. And maybe that's not legitimately the case.
Right.
Because a lot of people are putting social media up saying like, I went here, I applied, other friends, and they said, oh no, we filled the position, but the sign is still up.
Right.
And everybody at this place says nobody knew is working.
Yep.
So
Yeah, they're actually ghosting people with it. They're not.
Yeah.
They don't really mean it.
It wouldn't surprise me because at the end of the day, their bottom line is going to be money.
sure.
And if they can pay the least amount of people to get the job done, to let it fly by under the radar, why pay more?
But it also supports that whole narrative of this is the way it should be.
Right.
Just because one generation suffered and sucked it up and whatever,
You should
do it too. It's like,
Right.
no, the whole structure should change.
Exactly.
That doesn't invalidate what you did.
Right.
It's okay.
No one's disrespecting your
Yes.
service. No
Thank
one's
you.
disrespecting the time you've put in.
Exactly.
No one's disrespecting your struggle or your plight. We're just recognizing it.
Yep.
And I think that's the problem. I think if we recognize them more and say, this is your problem and I'm trying to help it, instead of being like, oh, now something's changed.
Right.
Nothing's changed. We're trying to be that change.
And we really don't have different goals.
Right.
I don't have a goal of being lazy or
Right.
rich.
Right.
Nobody's going to get rich off of this. It's just I have a goal of staying alive.
Right.
But yeah. And also, this doesn't get said enough. 12 cents today is not like 12 cents 20, 30 years ago.
Yes.
Anyways.
Well, even in like the you go to the grocery store, you can fill up a cart for $20 with bananas and bread and milk, and you're gonna have 5-10 things.
Yeah.
You go to McDonald's, $20. You know what I mean?
Oh,
like
yeah.
it's a lot easier to just get a whole meal prepped for you for $10
Sure.
than to buy 20 different things, spend the time, and to clean up. So, why is it that we price food a lot higher if it's healthier for us?
Agreed.
It shouldn't be that way.
Critical questions, especially when people have health issues.
Yes, and that goes back to like a lot of different diseases go back to your gut, and it goes back to what you eat. You are what you eat. So if we could just drink more water, and if we could just eat more greens,
Yep.
could we get rid of some of these diseases that that we don't know what's causing them?
Well, I wanted to make a point about the volunteers. I've been telling people in the party, we need to start, the game has changed. We need to start raising money so that we can pay people to knock on doors now. We can't expect them to just come to us anymore. Not that it was really easy before,
Right.
but now it's particularly hard.
Yep.
And people are going to want to walk away with something, just because, like I said, they just have, their time is more valuable now than it was. And it all just had to do with changing the way we think about it.
Right.
Especially when you're trying to advocate for people who are locked into that scraping and scrabbling kind of cycle.
Right.
It's like their time is so much more valuable to them.
Right.
It's like, do the lights stay on or not?
And when you're in that position, it's a whole mindset.
Yeah.
Like your whole day to day is surrounded and focused on that individual specific like moment of time, that struggle.
Sure.
When in reality, for the most people, that's just like a little thing. You brush it off, you go about your day, you keep, you know what I mean? But when you're in that, like, the woe is me, my life sucks, you have to break out of that in order to seek the help that you need.
Very true. Yeah.
Do you think that, it seems to me that we've almost skipped a generation in terms of like where we've progressed on certain issues. Like we've made a huge jump in a very short period of time when it comes to issues like, medical cannabis or legal cannabis, with, pardon me, hit a wall. Excuse me.
Prescription drug prices? No?
No, like LGBT rights,
Oh, there you go.
marriage, things
Human
like
rights,
that, racial
equality.
issues. Yeah, it's like, I mean, just when it was kind of funny watching the protests a couple of years ago. Not funny, haha, but it was
Ironic.
Well, it was almost like it was opportunistic because everyone was quarantined for the pandemic, so they had the time to do stuff like that. Now you don't. It's like, where did the protesters go?
Sure.
Yep.
When I was growing up, it was a lot more difficult to take a position on race. And you were mentioned this earlier, that we need to have a conversation. I think one great example of that is like in South Lake, where if you listen to the people that are going to those school
board
meetings, you can hear it's not that this was a good idea, that we should figure out a better way to teach our kids to think, to be more tolerant. We don't want to have the discussion about tolerance, period.
Right.
No.
I got into somewhat of an argument on social media, one of my favorite pastimes, and this was just the other night. And there was a woman in one of the political groups locally talking about how there's a book that they want taken out of the FISD, and how her oldest kid has been indoctrinated and thinks this type of way, and she's talking about all this stuff. And I'm like, so I commented and I was like, so you're telling me that you're complaining and you're trying to blame FISD for your child being more respectful, more intelligent, and more compassionate about your neighbors that don't have the same political party than you are, and that you've taught them.
Right.
It got quiet.
Oh my God.
So you know what I mean? It comes down to
That's wild.
That's what it is. And I've seen several memes. It's these people who were yelling at the young black children going into schools whenever schools are being, desegregated, and then now they're older and now they're seeing. It's like you said, it skipped a generation. Everything did happen so fast, but it's all about equity, and they see it as we're taking their things,
Right.
when that's not it. No one's taking over. No one. It's about leveling the playing field and making sure that we're all starting at the same spot, and that we're not pushing people down. I don't understand this whole, let's go back in time and take away rights, voting rights, women's rights. I mean, it's just, it doesn't make sense. Like, why? It's all misinformation.
It's like that
and
meme that's out
political.
there that's like, human rights aren't pie. If I get more, you don't get less.
Right.
Things
Right.
like, I'm not taking them. I just want my share.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, the economy too.
Right.
No, I brought that up earlier because mental health is another issue where it seems like we've come a long way. It's actually almost fashionable now to admit that you're seeking
Right.
it, or that you have a condition.
Right.
But I will say, it doesn't seem like we've made as much gains in the area when it comes to disability. Like, I think we still have a long way to go. And
Agreed.
It's particularly, we talked about on another episode, it seems like there are two groups that never seem to have a constituency. It's children and people who are disabled.
Right.
And their caregivers.
That's one thing that's always frustrated me is, I can never claim her as a dependent because it was her house, and she was getting like the hundreds of thousands of dollars of grant funding for the MS medication. So she was not depending on my paycheck. So how is it that these families can get, $3,000 per kid?
Yeah.
And yet there are so many people in my situation where it could be one child who's working and caring for an elder family
Sure.
member, and yet they can't claim anything on the IRS. They can't. There is no resource. There's literally no, like, we recognize you and we're going to assist you.
There is, within VA benefits, there is a provision where a caretaker person can apply for a certain stipend or something like that to do. So the model is there, is what I'm saying.
And other states have similar stuff.
Yeah.
And I think in Texas, like, if I wanted to go and like go through the training and become a CNA, or like,
Right.
go through certain training, sure, I could have become some sort of like legal caretaker. You know
But
what I
should
mean?
you have to?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Should you have to do all that to get the help that you're needing? You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
no one's making up the disease. The disease is there. It's been diagnosed. It's not changing. But yet, why do we have to go back and like fill out the same stuff? All this information. Nothing's changed. With a progressive disease, it's going to get worse and worse and worse.
Sure.
But yet, I have to come prove to the insurance that no miracle has happened.
Right.
My mom's not up walking around every day. But yet, let me prove to you after 20 years.
Sure.
Let me beg. Like, why do we always have to beg and be the person to, like, keep on top of it and call them back and call them back? Why is it not just, here's what we're going to do, let's get it done? And,
Especially
it's always
for the people
us
that have
fighting against the rules.
That's very true. And it's the worst part about that is these are the people who have the least capacity to fight.
Right.
Like I'm the
Tired.
person with the disease and I've got or the disability and I've got the issue, or my caretaker is overwhelmed with me, and
Right.
like when do you have time to make 10,000 phone calls?
Right.
Like I'd rather not.
Right, you're asking people who can't fight for themselves
Exactly.
to fight for
to
themselves.
fight harder
yeah.
than healthy, able.
Right.
Like ugh.
Right.
Well, no, it's amazing to me sometimes what we prioritize in terms of like where this issue of trust between the citizen and government comes in. Like, for instance, we fully trust people to get licensed and carry firearms,
Right.
and yet we don't trust you to provide accurate information, truthful information
Right.
about your domestic situation, just to get help. It's
Yep.
Yep.
Grrr.
yeah. I probably just stepped in it for both of us, but
Hey, that's why we're in this,
Yeah,
though.
yeah, right.
That's supposed to be the whole point,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Some pain point is supposed to motivate people to make change.
Yeah.
This is it, right?
What is happening right now, like on a local and state level, in terms of any particular help that you can get? Something that you could actually or have made a part of your platform.
What do you mean?
Well, I'm just turning like in terms of local help, from the government, or you mentioned grant money from charities. I'm like, is we really have to go that far down the line to actually? It just
Yeah, over the year, because she's had several different, insurances and medical, there's disability with companies, there's all different avenues. But there is no like centralized database. There's no, you know what I mean? Like the doctors don't talk to each other. So she may go to a foot doctor for the leg issue, but they're not going to call the neurologist and say, hey, here's what's going on. They don't call, you know what I mean? So you've got one patient being cared for one disease, but with 18 different doctors.
Well,
Where are we, you know what I mean?
And they don't share the information, so yeah. That could speed everything up.
Yeah, I meant more in terms of like from a policy or a program perspective, like as far as Collin County government or Texas state government, what are they doing?
Well, I
or
could
should
tell
be
you,
doing?
I applied last year. Oh, not last year, 2020, I believe 2020 for the CARES Act. Got denied. I got a phone call, and this was before my mom went into assisted living.
Well, before you
yeah.
go on, what specifically were you applying for? Because when we're talking about the CARES Act, we're talking about money that was appropriated during COVID
for rental assistance.
Rental assistance, okay.
Yes. And we weren't behind on a bill yet, so we got a call one day, and they called her phone, and they said, have you paid your bill this month? Yes. Okay, well then we can't give you any money until you've missed your payment. Well, then you're getting into the legalities of, so you want me to miss a mortgage payment to potentially lose my house because you're going to promise to give me a payment?
It's great.
I'm coming to you beforehand, before I have $0 to say, help with this rent. And you say, no, you're not there yet.
Right.
Where is that? So one thing I know, and I could be misled on this as well, but there's something called the North Central Texas Council of Governments, and I'm not out to get them or anything, but it's a local board, but it's all elected officials, but they're not elected to this board.
They're appointed.
No. They're by themselves. There's no oversight.
Okay.
Yeah, and so they actually are the ones that control all the funding that comes into Texas from the federal government. So these are like local leaders, yes, so like city mayors, things like that. So they are elected in their own right, but they're not elected to this board. No one gives them permission to tell us where those funds go. And that's why we're seeing so many funds misrepresented, because they're choosing their pet projects and not the people. It's not going to, you know what I mean?
One of the more telling things about the CARES Act, and because we're talking like at a county level, the money, one of the first funding sources that closed was the one for emergency rental assistance. What does that tell you?
Right.
Yeah.
Right away. And this was even with the moratoriums, that were, kind of unevenly dispersed throughout the country. But
Well, and that goes
go ahead.
back to 2008 when, people's homes that, were paid out with in cash, they're getting letters that they're going to be foreclosed on. And, there was literally a viral case where they walked into the bank with, sheriffs and said, we're going to take everything in this bank because they were trying to repossess a house that was paid for in full. And they had all the documentation. So it's like, again, in times of crisis, these institutions and organizations will take over, and they will try to push every envelope that they can to get every little cent out of it.
Yeah, you don't have to tell me, my friend.
Good Lord.
You're familiar. Yeah.
Very
Well,
true.
no, and even now, it's still a problem. I still hear stories from friends back home in New Orleans that are having trouble with their contractors from Katrina. I mean, this is going on 17 years now.
Yeah.
And it was like a big swoop of vultures flew in because there's all that money's being tossed around.
Right.
Not just at the federal level, but state level also. There are programs. And they flew in and they flew out. And so many people were left in the lurch.
Right.
Yeah. So it's one of the things where I was kind of glad to see that during the pandemic, the government decided to give money directly to taxpayers without any strings.
Right.
Just like a straight infusion. And I'm like,
Right.
that's the way you need to do it. People know how to spend money.
Right.
It's another thing, another issue when it comes to trust, right? Why should we should make people jump through hoops so they can, or make them qualify for this money because they're not going to know how to spend it. Well, that's clearly not the case.
Right. Yep.
And a lot of the price inflation we're seeing, I mean, it has something to do with the whole network of economies being broken up by the supply chain, but also has to do with the fact that we were all flush at a certain point and we were big spenders,
Right.
We kept the economy going.
Yep.
That was us. Right. So yeah, that's one of the things I just wish we could do better. We could change.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's all you do is jump through hoops just to get what little help you can, right? You just want some consideration, and even
Right.
then it's not possible.
Right.
Because what they're saying is essentially they don't trust you.
Right. They want you to utilize all your funds. So say you've got $20,000 in a bank account. They want you to be down at zero before they're going to give you any help. So instead of helping you so that way you have that for a rainy day when something goes wrong and you have to have a surgery, they want you to deplete your entire life savings so they can come in and be the savior instead of being a proactive partner to help,
It's kind of like we were on a previous podcast where I was talking about how when you leave a job, you need to wait for your status to be updated by your employer to your 401k company before you can go and get your money, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are. They're saying, no, your status has to change from good to dire before we'll even look at you. And like you said, and then I'm going to trust you
Right.
to give me the help that you said I'm going to qualify for now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
That reminds me of how people qualify for inpatient substance abuse rehab with insurance agencies. You have to fail out of lower levels of care. So basically you have to try outpatient counseling and relapse. And then
Right.
you have to try another level and then relapse. And then you've had several failed attempts. There's this long track record of wreckage in your life from substance abuse before we'll finally send you to an inpatient rehab.
Right.
Good plan. That's great. I'm sure that's great for everybody.
Yeah.
So talk about the confluence of events that brought you to actually decide to run for office. How did that take place?
Well, it's
Big sigh.
it is a lot of things. It's a lot of things. Over the past 4 years in general, I've really just kind of been getting involved, and for the longest time, I was one of those be the change kind of people who loves to spout and get mad on Facebook and throw a bunch of exclamation points, but nothing was happening. And I just would get so frustrated, and I'm like, well, what am I doing? If I'm not doing anything to fix it, no one else is doing anything to fix it either.
Yep.
So that's one thing. With my mom, passing last year and seeing the whole industry of the medical field in general, with MS, it being such a disease where it affects everyone differently. Mm-hmm. Some people are blind. Some people, have speech issues. Some people wake up and they're fine. With my mom, it was her leg. It was limping. But it's just one of those things that I kind of lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
Well, no, we're talking about how you came to run for office.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So with I've seen that whole kind of deterioration of the medical industry over the last 20 years. They rely on opioids and pain medications that get these patients hooked, whether they realize it or not.
Right.
They have a dependence on this medicine to relieve the pain. Instead of fixing the pain, we are masking it with a Band-Aid. That way, when the Band-Aid needs to be thrown away, you'll buy a new Band-Aid. We're not fixing these root problems. So that's one reason. The other thing is last year, at the beginning of the year, my mom was in her wheelchair, her automated wheelchair. She was driving herself. She was with my mom's aide. They were going into the AT&T store, and the ramp.
I'm sorry.
What?
That you went
AT&T.
to
Yeah.
Been there. Okay.
Yeah.
The ramp, you know how most of them, the whole sidewalk goes down and then back up. And then if you're going on like a corner one, it's pretty round and wide.
It should be.
But Frisco, for some reason, has multiple locations where the sidewalk will stop and they'll keep like a foot and a half going straight. And then the left side is a ramp.
Oh.
What's the purpose of that? If you're on a wheelchair, one wheel.
Yeah.
And so she flipped over, concussion, busted her nose, split open her eyebrow. The most blood that I've ever seen when I showed up with the ambulance.
Yeah, head
and
wounds
everyone.
bleed a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what basically I think sent her down
Yeah.
for that last year of her life was that trauma. And it was preventable. Why do we have a sidewalk that's split halfway for the able-bodied to continue to walk? I can walk down a ramp and up a ramp just fine. There's no, and some of them will have a railing there to try to prevent that. But again, it's just a design error.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that's not been addressed because it might be legally under the radar with the rules for handicap accessibility.
Sure.
So that's something that I want to make changed. Make sure that every single place in Frisco and anywhere, it's gone.
So it's funny. One of the other issues it seems like you have on your tip sheet here is like more access or legality to marijuana usage and things like that. And we've long since said like one of the reasons why that's kept there is so that we can make money off of fining people, imprisoning people, things like that for right. So then you have to kind of like ask yourself like, well, why don't we find these companies that aren't building the right ramps with government compliances and make some money that way?
Right.
Like get it from the corporations, not
Right.
necessarily from the people.
Right.
Anyways.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, I think
Because it begs the question, why would you shortcut it?
Right.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
Yeah.
No, but I actually spoke to a resident this week who's a construction worker, and he's from Canada originally, and he said at this particular project that he's on in Richardson, there was like ice on the ground that was right around like a highly trafficked area, for employees, for workers. And even though they were able to just walk around it, back in Canada, they would have removed the ice, no questions asked.
Oh, sure.
You see, they would have taken the potential impediment, no matter how small or how unlikely it was to cause a problem. It was going to be a problem in their eyes.
Right.
Whereas, like you said, we don't even.
It's a country of ambulance chasers, right? We gotta go in and get the money. It's not about fixing the problem.
Yeah. Or
How can we get on the top end of this deal while the problem's being fixed?
Right.
I think a lot of that too, though, goes to, oddly, circles back again also to the, lowered wage for people, because it's like, if you are so focused with just surviving, you don't have a lot to think about other people's welfare. Like, how do I fix a problem that's right in front of me? And like one of the main differences there is in Canada, we know, they have different systems and things like that in place. And if like every moment of your waking life feels like nothing but pointless suffering,
Right.
you don't have a lot of energy to pour out to the other people around you. You don't have a mindset of service.
Right.
So,
Well, kind of like Chris Rock said, the money's not in the cure. The money's in the medicine.
Sure.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. 100%.
So, if there was one thing that you wanted people to know about you that they don't know, what would it be?
One thing. Well, this year I'll say that my 3 words for the year are health, knowledge, and service. So,
Nice.
being a caretaker for so long, I do have some volunteer experience, but for the longest time, it was, me at home getting off a job, being frustrated with what happened that day at the job, coming home to more problems. There was a time where I slept on the couch for 3 years because, if I was in my room, I wouldn't hear her screaming for help in the middle of the night. These people that are in my situation go through those small daily frustrations, like we were talking about, that just add up to depression, whether it's clinically diagnosed or not. When you are not getting help and your life just doesn't seem like people, valued.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It can be very difficult. So now that I have availability and time, I don't want to just go get a job to make myself money.
Sure.
I'm trying to do a little bit more of the service, get my health on track, and then knowledge. So by knowledge, I want to do a lot more listening.
Yeah.
I do a lot of talking, and I do a lot of, exclamation points on Facebook. So I need to start listening to people more and trying to be that kind of common ground. I call the right out a lot for certain things. There's a local church leader in my area that happened to be, the church is directly across from my high school, who spouts hate and violence. And that's one of the reasons I stepped up, is because we've got to take this divisiveness away. We've got to realize that it's not us versus them versus us, left versus right. It's just the people need help. And that's what we need to do.
You have to almost assume that the other side has some reasonable reason why they have their point of view. But you can still hold up a mirror and say, but do you understand how the way that, or the things that you're advocating, like how that affects other people?
Right.
It's like, I can understand why you're choosing what you're choosing, but look at the effect. It's not an isolated choice a lot of times.
And a lot of times these people haven't actually had these conversations.
Oh, yeah.
And they're not actually engaging with anyone else that has no, other ideas but what they believe in.
They're in that airlock.
Yes.
Kind of, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where they're just circling around the same info, and they're not actually listening, and they don't want to hear. They don't want to hear my story about why I think healthcare is important.
Right.
Well, my mom had MS. You should have just deal with it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Be a man, deal with it. You know what I mean? Times are changing.
I did the manly thing. I stepped the fuck up. That's what I did. That's like the opposite of toxic masculinity. You showed up and got things done no matter what it took. That's
exactly.
good.
Even on days when I failed, I wasn't perfect. We had our arguments and disagreements for sure.
But again, that's why it's important for people to have more support than just one person.
Yes,
you need a care
village.
team.
Right.
You need respite. You need breaks every now and then.
And they say it takes a village for new parents. Everyone always says, to the mom, they say, oh, it takes a village.
Right.
But no one says that when it's an ailing family member. Everyone just, expects you'll deal with it. Right.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the way people want to deal with it is just push it away, push it off on somebody else.
Right.
That's not...
Real quick, I don't think I heard, though, how you actually got to the point where you decided to run. In terms of was it just something, was an arbitrary decision on your part, or did someone in the party say, hey, we think you'd be a good candidate?
I definitely had conversations. I was approached and just had conversations about what that would mean, for sure. But in all fairness, what it came down to was, like I was talking about this specific pastor, he is really close friends with my opponent. And my opponent keeps getting elected. And I want to see an animal shelter in Frisco. And there's been many organizations, many nonprofits that are trying over and over again to get a animal shelter for Frisco. But yet if we keep electing these same people in over and over again who are not getting us what we want, you know what I mean? So it was really about trying to step up and be that change. If you're standing on stage next to someone who's saying, don't go shoot your neighbor on your front porch. Wait for them to enter your house, so that way you don't have a blood trail dragging inside. When they're saying that in front of a crowd of 40 people, like they want violence, I wasn't gonna let another Republican win because I didn't say anything. I didn't stand up. When I was so tired of just seeing people win because no one ran against them.
Sure.
So they might not be the best person for the job. They might not be qualified. I might not be the best person, and I might not be qualified. But I'm done with this whole letting them have it.
Yeah.
To what? To go spout violence against my neighbors?
So you decided to put up or shut up. Basically,
Yeah.
you threw the skin in the game.
Yeah.
All
I said
right.
I'm here.
Yeah, good for you. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's the only thing it really takes.
Yeah.
But this has been great.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
It goes by quick, doesn't
It
it?
does.
It does. I love it.
I've had a great time. I would love to come back.
Great. Maybe we can talk more about the animal shelter.
Yes.
All right. Well, once again, this has been another episode of Collin Votes, and this one again's been brought to you by Jesse Ringness, our guest today, running for House District 66. Oof, goodness. For any more information you'd like to know about him and his campaign, you can find Jesse on Facebook. That's probably going to be the best place. The page there is Ringness for TXDH66, or you can email.
TXHD66.
Did I not say that? Did I mess it up?
I think it was TXHD66.
You're probably right. So it's Ringness, your last name, Ringness, for
FOR.
TX HD66.
Correct.
Got it. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And subscribe to my YouTube channel.
Oh, right. The YouTube channel is Be the Change 2021.
Yes, youtube.com/c/Be the Change 2021.
You're so good. Look at you. You came prepared.
Thank y'all for having me on the show.
Sounds good. Thank you, sir.
All right, Jeff, you ready to kill this?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. Thanks, guys. See you next time.